Executive Committee of 4th March 2026. We have present in the meeting Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael, Chalmers, Clark, Convery. I'll just check if we've got Councillor Cooper in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Cooper in the meeting at the present time. We have present Councillors Cowan, Devlin, Fagan, Ferguson Miller, Frame, Hamilton, Kerr, Lambie, Logan, Loudon, McAllen, McClymont, Leslie MacDonald. I'll just check if Councillor McLachlan's in the meeting. Yep, Councillor McLachlan's in the meeting. And we have present Councillors Nelson, Ray, Razak. We have apologies from Councillor Robb. And we have present Councillors Ross, Shearer and Walker. And I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to item 1, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any, so can we come now to item 2, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I'm not seeing any questions, so could we approve the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you very much. I will come now to item 3, which is a revenue budget monitoring report and probable outturn report, and I'll come to Jackie Taylor to speak to that item. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is a regular revenue budget monitoring report, taking us to the 23rd of January. The first part of the report is a reminder at section 4 of the probable outturn position that we reported previously to committee. We reported an underspend of £3.579 million and a reminder at 4.2 on what was agreed that these funds would be spent on at the Executive Committee in February. We continue to expect the position presented in the probable outturn to be our expected year-end position. Also noted in section 5 is some funds that we have received in 25-26 which were confirmed when we received our settlement in January. They are detailed there for you on page 18 and include areas such as pay award that we were expecting. If I can draw your attention to the top of page 19, just at 5.5, there's a reference there to local action fund monies, a small edit to a recipient which has been agreed with local members that we will be looking for approval for. And at section 6, the housing revenue account, we're reporting a break-even position, which is in line with our probable outturn. So if I take us back to section 2 and the recommendations, which include that the break-even probable outturn position after transfer to reserves is noted, and also that £1,000 edit toward 19 local action fund monies to be reallocated as per recommendation 3 re-approved. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Jackie, can I ask if there are any questions in that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. Come now to item 4, which is a capital budget monitoring report, and I'll come back to Jackie Taylor to speak to that item. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the capital monitoring report, again to the 23rd of January. Section 4.1 confirms the programme for general fund, which is £67.7 million. There's no adjustment to that this cycle. However, there are 2 additional funds that we have received in, and they're detailed at the top of page 26. Firstly, a grant for £98,000, which is to design a building for the development of the Gaelic language. We have received that in 25-26. However, seeing as the spend will be made into 26-27, we'll add it into the 26-27 programme. Similarly, funds that we've received from Walk Wheel Cycle Trust of £99,000. Again, given the timing of the award, we will add that to the 26-27 programme. 4.5 details the forecast for the year, again reporting the same as we did to last committee, an underspend of £1.7 million expected. That's in relation to East Kilbride Town Centre and Hamilton Junctions. Housing programmes detailed at section 5 of the report. We have a programme of £87.7 million and at 5.2 continuing to report a small underspend that's expected on that programme of £1.8 million. I'd also point out at 5.7 we have received additional funding of £1.7 million, which will allow the Council to carry out some building assessments for medium and high-rise buildings. Again, we're adding that into 26-27 programme, given the time of the year that that award has been made. Take you back to section 2 and the recommendations. We're asking that the position for the General Fund and Housing Capital programmes are noted. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jackie. Can I ask if there are any questions on this item? Could you please indicate now? I don't see any questions. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 5, which is an update to funding. And Jackie, will ask you to speak to this report as well.
Thank you very much. So again, another regular report to committee. This is the update to funding. This time round, I'm reporting just over £15 million in terms of additional funding. Revenue funding for 25-26 is 8.496 million, and for 26-27 it's £4.67 million. Capital funds is £1.849 million. The details included in the appendices. On page 35, we have the revenue funding in Appendix 1. The first 4 items on that appendix are the same as the additional funds that I reported as part of the revenue paper earlier. This is the information we received as part of our settlement in January. Then we have Nature Restoration Fund monies of £142,000. That was as expected. We have additional funds that support our work with refugees from Ukraine for £123,000. And finally, at the bottom of that page, we have employability funding, No One Left Behind, of £4.671 million. Again, that's in line with our expectations. Capital funding is detailed on page 36 in Appendix 2. First item in that table is the HRA funding around cladding remediation of £1.652 million. And we also have the 2 funds that I reported as part of the capital programme. We've got the Gaelic funding, £98,000, and the Walk Wheel Cycle Trust funds of £99,000 at the bottom of the table as well. I take you back to recommendations at section 2 of the report, and we're asking that those additional funds are noted. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. Can I ask if there are any questions? Should you please indicate now, and could I come to Margaret Walker?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask in relation to Appendix 1, the Employability Fund, 4.6 million, could you advise what the process will be for actually allocating that money? Thank you.
Jackie, or?
Thanks, Councillor Walker. The Community Enterprise Resources team are the resource that are responsible for employability, and they look on an annual basis around employability programmes. I believe there's reports that are reported back to the Community Enterprise Resources Committee around employability, but we can get some more information on the programme of works into 26-27.
Margaret?
That would be really useful information if we could get that in terms of where the spread bit's going to be. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Could I come now to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Can I ask about the Nature Restoration Fund? I think I'm right in saying we've done quite well this year in terms of the tree planting numbers and arrangements, but I think there's some question mark over future years in terms of how this is going to be done. I wonder if there's any update on that, or if we had any clarity as to when we might get information from the Scottish Government on it.
Jackie?
Yeah. There was additional funding that was provided, and that's we knew that wasn't continuing, so that has come off of the amounts that councils have received. I think there's still some information that's outstanding about any additional funds that may be made available, but that hasn't been confirmed as yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so can I draw us back to the recommendations in the report? Can I ask if we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 6, as we're agreed, which is on the it's the bank holiday for the FIFA World Cup, and Jackie Taylor is going to speak to this report as well. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper relates to the proposed arrangements to enable employees to celebrate Scotland's first game in the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The opening game is on Sunday, the 14th of June, and an additional bank holiday was confirmed by Royal Proclamation for Monday, the 15th of June, on the request of the Scottish Government. This is a decision for individual local authorities to make. So, following the approach that's been taken in previous similar occasions, if agreed, an extra fixed annual leave day on Monday the 15th of June would need to be granted. This would mean that non-essential services would reduce and offices closed where possible. We've detailed the services that will be provided at the bottom of page 37 and over on page 38. Again, these reflect the same as the previous occasions where an additional day has been given. Employees that are required to work on that additional fixed leave day will receive appropriate time off at another time to be taken. And again, this is consistent with previous similar events. The financial implications are detailed at section 6.1. The costs that would be associated with backfilling those staff that would be able to take time off at another time would be up to a maximum of £300,000. As this is one-off spend over a number of service areas, we would look to contain this within existing budgets. Again, that was the case in previous similar occasions. So if I can take you back to the recommendations, we're asking that committee approves that the granting of an additional fixed annual leave day for employees on Monday the 15th of June is approved. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? Could I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a great news story. It gives our many staff the chance to celebrate and mark the great occasion of our Scotland men's team reaching our first World Cup in almost 30 years. And I'm sure we'll all be either watching or supporting them as they do that. Hopefully it'll also support our hospitality businesses as well, local hospitality businesses, which also aligns with the decision from our licensing boards to grant extended opening hours. I think the only question remains is that what are we going to do when we win the final?
Obviously not sobered up.
Right. I'll not repeat what I just heard there. Okay, I'll consider that a rhetorical question and move on to Morazak.
Thank you, Chair. I think we'll be lucky to get into the next round, never mind. That'll be worth celebrating, never mind. That'll be worth celebrating, never mind anything else. My question would be that in the budget we put the rent up, we put the council tax up, and the water rates has gone up as well. So how would we be selling this to the members of public that, you know, that we're giving staff a day off up to £300,000 cost? And the other question would also be that Women's World Cup in 2019, I think that was the first time they qualified for the World Cup. I don't notice anybody holidays for that, so there doesn't seem to be any equality to it.
Okay, I'm happy to pick up those questions, and I think I would just say the decision was made by the Scottish Government. It was approved subsequently by the King, and since 1995, I'm not aware of any precedent. I'm happy to be corrected of the Council not granting a public holiday in those circumstances. I think the paper sets out the arrangements that we have around continuity of services. And I would also just make the point, I think, is just been made that I do think there is a benefit here, not just to our workforce, because we're going to see what a growing number of employers across the public and private sector recognising this, but also I do think there's a benefit here to the hospitality sector in South Lanarkshire and across Scotland. So I would take all that into account, and on that basis I'm content with the recommendation. But I think the questions about how unusual this particular holiday is, I think, are better addressed to the government. Okay, could I come to Richard Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Again, I fully understand the significance of Scotland qualifying for the World Cup, the first time, I believe, since 1998, and I recognise that it's an exciting moment for many people across Scotland and in South Lanarkshire, but unfortunately I cannot support this proposal. As a trade unionist, I absolutely support the principles of workers having fair leave and the opportunity to celebrate important national events. However, we have a responsibility as elected members to consider the financial position of this council and the impact of the decisions on the public that we make in here. Only recently, last week, the council agreed to increase the council tax by 6.5%, placing additional pressures on households across South Lanarkshire, at a time when residents are being asked, as Councillor Morazak said already, to contribute more. So I don't believe that it is appropriate for this council to incur up to £300,000 in additional cost to facilitate an extra leave day. The Scottish Government chose to mark this occasion through a royal proclamation, but importantly, no additional funding, I believe, has been provided to local authorities to support the implementation of that decision. If the Scottish SNP Government believes this should be recognised nationally, then I believe that funding should have accompanied that request rather than passing, as it always do, financial burden to councils. Local government is already facing significant financial pressures and difficult decisions about services that we've had over the past few months. In that context, spending up to £300,000 in an additional leave day is not something that I can justify to my constituents that I represent, particularly after increasing their council tax. I believe there's 9 councils who have voted not to do this already, and for those reasons, while I appreciate the spirit of the proposals and the excitement around Scotland's participation in the World Cup, I cannot, and our group will not support the recommendation before us, and I'd like to have that noted, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We've noted your position. I've got another speaker to take, so can I come to Katie Loudon?
Thanks very much, Chair. I do note the points from Mo about the women's game, and I really appreciate them being made, and I appreciate the previous speakers as well, like my colleague who pointed out that we were talking about the men's national team here, and that there is another national football team in Scotland as well, of course. There's still very much work to be done around the women's game, although the success of the team in the last few years, and also the amazing success of the English women's national team as well has meant that there's far more recognition, which has been great to see. Certainly much more than I remember when I was growing up, and for my daughter's generation and the generations that are coming up as well. That idea that you can't be what you can't see, and to see that it's been receiving that level of attention is great. But of course we're talking about specifically the World Cup, which is coming up, which is the men's team. Interesting I respect the points that Councillor Nelson has just made. I don't remember similar points or similar fuss being made around when we were being asked to approve a bank holiday for the coronation, so it's a bit of an interesting contrast there. I just wondered, cost-wise and arrangement-wise, how does this compare to the arrangements which we had in place for the bank holiday during the coronation? And have we learned any lessons from those arrangements that we can take forward into this bank holiday just now? Sorry.
Okay, there is a question there, and I'll maybe see if any of our team want to pick it up before. Okay, Jackie.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the approach we're taking this time round is the same as the approach we've taken for the coronation, which worked fine. So in terms of the lessons learned, the services that we've proposed replicate the approach we took for the coronation as well.
Okay, thank you. Could I come now to Alec Allison?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just following on from that, what is the position then? Well, no, what's the position? I noticed education is the only resource that is not mentioned in the paper in terms of services that will continue. Why? Are we closing the schools, or has it just been missed out? What's happening?
Okay, Jackie.
Yeah, the intention would be that the schools would be closed.
That's causing issues when with all the majority of families in South Lanarkshire who won't be getting the day off.
Right. Okay. Oh, sorry.
I should highlight as well, I've checked, the 9 councils that I have heard that have rejected this holiday. Most of them have been cross-party for the reasons of costs and other implications. Why are we not taking account of these?
Right. Right now is the point at which we can make a decision on it. And what I would just say is that across the public sector, there are a number of councils have opposed this, other councils have accepted this, but there are a number of employers across the public sector and the private sector and the third sector who will be recognising this public holiday. I think questions have been raised about the equality of status afforded to the men's and the women's game. Points have been raised about how these events are funded. I think these are legitimate questions. I would suggest these are legitimate questions for the Scottish Government. I come back to the point I've made previously. We are in a position where the Government have announced a public holiday. It has been approved through a royal proclamation as a bank holiday. It will be recognised by a number of employers across the country. And the decision for councillors here is simply, do we want to be one of them or not? And I would recommend, and the Labour group would support the recommendations in the paper, which are that we should be. And I would just point out to people that regardless of the reasons for this particular public holiday, In Scotland and in the UK, by European standards, we have a very low number of public holidays compared to the employment practices that are normal in other countries. And I appreciate this is a one-off. This is not a rebalancing in workers' rights, but I do think that's something that's important to bear in mind. Ultimately, I think this is beneficial for our workforce, and I think it's beneficial for parts of our economy where we will be expecting to celebrate our presence and maybe even success in the World Cup this year. Look, I'm happy to move the recommendations in the paper. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
I've got a seconder. Councillor Nelson's indicated that he would not support that. Are you going to move to the contrary?
No, I'm not moving it, Chair. I don't think we need to take it to a vote. I would like to just put my comments on record that I don't think that the Conservative group can support it, not just myself. It's a Conservative group cannot support that additional day off without funding coming from the Scottish Government and the council tax rise that this council just approved.
Okay, then, can I ask, are we agreed? We agree the recommendations in the paper? Are we agreed? We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to item 7, which is the South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture Active Age proposals for 2026-27 to 2028-29. And I will come to Kevin Carr to speak to this paper. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Committee. The purpose of the report is to present recommendations for amending the concession rate for the Active Age membership scheme for 2026-27. It's proposed that the price of the annual membership increases from £120 to £150 and that this price is then held for a period of 3 years. This is following a previous increase in 2024 from around £80 to £120. If approved, it is anticipated that the increase will generate an additional £243,000 in income, and this will contribute to closing the current SLLC budget gap of £3.5 million for 26-27. Section 4 of the report highlights membership increases over the last year, and the appendices set out the benefits of the scheme, results of recent customer consultation, as well as benchmarking information with comparator authorities offering similar schemes, which show that the cost of membership will remain one of the lowest in the region. If approved, the new concession rate will begin on the 1st of April 2026 for a 3-year period until 31st of March 2029. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you please indicate now? I'm not seeing any questions. Could I draw us back to the recommendations in the paper? Can I ask if we agreed?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. We'll come now to item 8, which is a paper on the Marmot Place programme. It is a data update, and I believe Jen Kerr is here to speak to that paper. Jen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I'm Jen Kerr, I'm the Community Engagement Manager, and I am absolutely delighted to present our first report from the Marmot Place programme in a long time. And this report provides some information on the progress of the local and the national data work that's been taking place under the programme. The paper outlines a little bit of background information about the Marmot Place programme. It's an evidence-based place approach where partners collaborate to reduce inequalities within defined places. The Marmot approach is based on a proportionate universalism theory, which is where a practice of maintaining strong universal services for all residents while targeting additional preventative support and investment to communities and persons experiencing greatest disadvantage across a spectrum of social inequality. The local data group was established last year and has been working alongside the national reports that are outlined in Section 6 of the report. The local data group has been working with our local services across all partners to produce 8 packs that mirror the Marmot 8 principles and provide very localised information about place and inequalities across South Lanarkshire. 3.4 is probably really the crux of the report, which is that both the national report and the local reports are starting to share the same outcome. Health inequalities are unfair, unavoidable differences in health and life chances between communities, with those who live in more deprived communities experiencing significantly poorer outcomes across the range of their life as they live, work, and grow. Reducing these inequalities requires action across all partner services. This isn't just about health services. Health inequalities affect us across our lifespan and contribute to our life expectancy, how long we are going to live and how well we're going to live while we're alive. We need to improve outcomes for individuals and families with the greatest need while maintaining support for everyone. That's a core part of the Marmot approach. And prevention and early intervention is the key to that for those that need it most. The CHES programme, CHES standing for Collaboration for Health Equity in Scotland, which is our Scottish name for the Marmot work, has 3 practical phases. The first phase has been the data phase, which we've been in for about the last year, and this report is beginning to give you the outputs from. Phase 2 is the next phase where we start to operationalize and understand the system that contributes to these inequalities and the services around those and the policies in place to address them. And phase 3 will bring us the recommendations of what we should do for action. We've started to move into phase 2 and 3 earlier this year, and the next report on the agenda will give you a bit more information about the systems and the actions that are taking place. Section 4 of the report outlines that there have been 2 national reports published by the Institute for Health Equity, which is Sir Michael Marmot's sort of academic research institute, who've been one of the partners alongside the 3 council pilot areas and Public Health Scotland in contributing to the understanding of how inequalities are affecting people across Scotland. The first report provided the national context for the local work and pretty much says the same things we're finding, that having a stronger evidence base is required, that there are inequalities and they are affecting people's life outcomes, and that services and investments should be targeted and reflect the scale of need of individuals across a range of social determinants, both across council areas and within them. The second report they published earlier this year focuses on inequalities across those same 8 factors that we're looking at here in our local data group, and recognizing that those factors, the 8 principles outlined in 4.2 of Marmot, all of those, each of those contributes. They're all very different parts of our life, and they are the social determinants that are contributing to those inequalities, and that we need to invest across all of them in a targeted way that reflects the needs of all people. The second report highlights that persistent inequalities and early years development, child poverty, and educational attainment remain, and which is part of the reason why we chose and came to you last year to say we'd like to focus on child poverty and on early years in particular, because we feel that that is the best place to start with preventing poor outcomes for persons. It also suggests that there is more work to be done to consider the sharing of resources and level of funds across Scotland and within local authorities, both in quantity and in how those are used to address long-standing inequalities. And you'll see in figure 1 our relative child poverty before housing costs, social gradients for South Lanarkshire, which were part of the second report by IHE, but is again mirrored in our own local information, letting that Burnbank Central and Udson is our highest area of child poverty, and that we have a range at the very, very top there to the very bottom. Now that line across the middle of the chart is our social gradient in South Lanarkshire. It's pretty steep. So those on the left-hand side of the chart being more deprived and those on the right-hand side being least deprived. The aim of the Marmot approach is that we flatten that line and we bring it down for everyone. And that means that everyone who lives in those areas across all of those services receives a type of service that is proportionate and flexible and responsive to their needs. What people need on the right-hand side is very different from what people need on the left, and that is what's going to drive how we look at transformation. The highest rate and the gap between the left-hand side of that chart and the right-hand side of that chart is another way to express that social gradient. The highest rate of relative child poverty in Burnbank Central Udston is 31.8%, and the lowest is in Bothwell at 2.5%. That is a significant gap, and whenever we look at information across the South Lanarkshire level, that's very hidden, because overall, because of our highs and lows, we're doing quite well and slightly below Scottish average. But when you look at it like this, you can see that where we're doing well, it's great. Where we're not doing well, it's pretty significant and well above the average. So our local data work has brought together national and local data and looked at how outcomes are different between the more and deprived communities and the least deprived communities across a range of indicators that we look at in each of the 8 packs. I would note that in order to do all of this work, IHE has devised a new way of ranking the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation that enables us for the first time ever to compare service data with the intermediate zones of the SIMD. That wasn't possible before this project. So our local 8 packs are going to be the first time we're able to see deprivation and compare it against the outputs from our services. Early indications from the analysis show that there's an overall pattern consistent with the social gradient. And while there are exceptions to some of these, which indicate that levels of deprivation alone do not fully explain outcomes, there's more consistent than there are exceptions to say that it does. The data work for PAC, the early years PAC and the second PAC, which is about sort of school-age children, are just about complete, and we will complete the rest of the 8 packs by the end of March, where this information will be summarised and made more available. So the work of the data group is to complete the 8 management packs, 1 for each of the principals, and there are planned awareness-raising shops to support implementation, verification of the evidence, and discussions for implementing further actions beyond the 2 years of the pilot project, where we've learned how to do this and how to apply it. We will be delivering some targeted workshops, but we will starting with early years providers to ensure that this information is accessible and understood and being made use of, more importantly. A key area of work for the local data group has been to ensure the data is accessible, and there's a new data profiler tool on the community planning website where any organization or partner or member of the public can search all of the census information by SIMD. Data Pack 1 is our first pack that's been completed, and it is for giving every child the best start in life, and it is 120 pages of stating the gap for each of those different indicators, and unfortunately it confirms that child poverty is the most pressing and cross-cutting issue affecting outcomes for children across South Lanarkshire. There are substantial variations between communities and clear social gradients across a range of outcomes, with some doing better and better than we expected, and some doing well, but we could do more. That this data-informed approach is going to help us review and transform the early years service in the pilot that you'll hear about in the next paper. Appendix 1 is a map that outlines the figures from along the M74, just to show you the range depending on the space and the place that you're in. And it outlines some of the key points of the first data pack. 6.2 is a data pack that is about enabling all children and young people and adults to maximize their learning opportunities, and you'll see there that these same trends continue for children living in deprivation and inequality, that there are consistent gradients across things like attendance rates in secondary school, and I think this is probably the Marmot key point, that inequalities affect us as where we're born, how we live, how we grow, how we work, and how healthy we are throughout our entire life. The remaining 6 packs will be completed by the end of March, and I would note that that data packs 7 and 8, nationally and locally, are proving to be the most difficult, as there's limited information on tackling racism and on environmental sustainability that is available in terms of service data at local levels. And the national and the local project pilot sites are going to work together to see what we can do to improve that, and it's been raised as an issue to tackle. So overall, in summary, the data work so far is showing us that people living in more deprived communities are more likely to experience poor outcomes from early childhood that will follow them throughout their life and affect their life opportunities and chances. This includes higher levels of child poverty, low school attendance and attainment, and poorer health in adulthood, and most importantly, shorter life expectancy. These outcomes vary between communities, but the pattern is overly consistent, that deprivation increases. As deprivation increases, outcomes for people generally worsen. And a key message from this analysis is that reducing this gap is our job, and it is the key point of Marmot, is to reduce the gaps across all 8 of those pillars together at the same time. And if we start with children in early years, that will continue to affect and change those gaps across the rest of the packs. So thank you for taking the time to read that and to look at Appendix 1 and 2, which also shows the life expectancy as well as child poverty on a more visualized infograph. I would now ask that you consider the recommendations, which are to note the work of the data group that's been completed to date, note the headline findings that the overall pattern which demonstrates how people are living in more deprived circumstances generally have poor outcomes. And I would ask that you approve for publication and circulation a series of infographics like the 2 attached to the pack for us to start to share this information with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. Can I ask if anyone wants to ask a question? Could you please indicate now? Before I come to the questions, I think I just want to put on record my thanks to everybody working for the Council and indeed amongst our partners who's been part of this Marmot pilot. There are 2 papers here. This is just the first of them. It's focused on data. And data can be a dry subject, but actually when you look into all those findings that Jen has shared with us, you can understand actually the moral urgency behind building that database, building those data sets, extracting those findings and contributing to what we really want to do, I think, as a local authority, which is place South Lanarkshire at the forefront of public service reform and social reform in Scotland. There's a moral urgency behind that, and don't ever lose sight of it when you're assimilating the information that comes from the data packs. Okay, I'll come now to the questions that we have, and I'll come to the first one, which is from Katie Loudon.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation, Jen. And I would agree with the Chair's comments about thanks to all the people who've been involved in this work so far as part of this pilot. So a comment first and then a couple of questions on the specifics of the appendix, if that's okay. I think as councillors we're used to in committee and in forums seeing the big headline figures sometimes. So we see the red light, green light, amber light, where we are on measures versus comparator authorities and nationally with sort of ticks and crosses and that kind of thing. But I really like the phrase that Jen used during that presentation, which is we can see when we start to drill down into some of this that when we're doing well, it's really great, but where we're not, it can be significant, and we can see that when we go into things in more depth. I think that's a really powerful way of thinking. It's been demonstrated today that the work of this data group is so valuable because of the breadth and the depth that they're able to get into behind some of these measures. The figure about secondary school attendance really jumped out at me as well. So it's page 75 if you haven't seen it, folks. And you've got nearly 9% variation in attendance between the most and the least deprived areas in Southland, which really is significant. You'll know that we've heard a lot about attendance over the last year or so. There's obviously a national focus on that. We've seen it rumble through to our committees in here as well, and new resources that have been put together for schools that we've produced as a council. And I was saying to colleagues this morning, when we've been in our schools locally as well, you can see that those conversations are taking place. So we know it's something that we're doing, but I think this is a really good example of, yes, attendance is an issue which we need to deal with more generally, but you can see needs to be a sharper focus or a different focus in some areas to make sure we're getting that right. So I do think that's really powerful. Yeah, it was a couple of quick questions on the graphics, which were Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. I know that you said that those were going to be sort of shared with various groups. It was just to ask whether or not those were going to be public-facing. But I just had a few questions about the place names then, and the sort of M74 type graphic. I was driving very responsibly up the M74 this morning. I got on at Junction 2, which is badged Rutherglen and Cambuslang on all of the road signs, the gantrays and everything like that. I get what this is doing. So in the first one, we've got Junction 2 is Clydesmill South, obviously. Camglen, it's one of the areas, and I get where these names are coming from as well, that these are, we use them in other contexts. And the second one, it's Farm Cross and Gallowflat, it's Junction 2. I would say somebody that lives in that area, Farm Cross and Gallowflat, if you said that to somebody in Rutherglen, they would know what you were talking about. That's recognisable for people, that's meaningful. Maybe not across all of Camglen, but certainly for people in those areas. Clydesmill South, again, somebody that lives very nearby. I had to think, hang on, where's that again? So I'm not, just maybe a wee tweak to the names of some of those if they are going public to make sure that people understand what that's about. But I think this looks great so far. Looking forward to hearing about the next paper as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll maybe come back to that. I think Tom Little has been sitting here and his team would have been responsible for the graphics. So I'm seeing Tom nodding. I think he's taken that on board. Okay. Can I come to Margaret Walker?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. It's very comprehensive. We were at the session on it the other week, and I think for at last to get an opportunity to sort of forensically analyse the data and use it to actually build on what we already have. Because obviously the principle of Sure Start is something to take forward, maybe on which I think the paper has seen on a neighbourhood basis, but building on the family support hubs, which I recently had the pleasure to actually go out and visit in Cambuslang, and they do absolutely brilliant work and are slowly kind of trying to redress the balance. And obviously the early years work is the same, and from what I'm reading from the report in the paper, that's going to be translated into a more place-based neighbourhood focus, and I think that is really good because we have the expertise here. We have been developing those more innovative service models now in Southland for a while that are making a difference. And I would agree with what the Chair said in terms of the sense of urgency that the data is thrown up, specifically around child poverty, which South Lanarkshire Council is focusing on in terms of the Marmot pilot. But I just would finish by saying one thing. The budget forecasts, for example, for children's services over the next 5 years or so are not good. We have had issues around the funding for children's services. We've had to move funding around. So I suppose I would finish by asking a question. Do you think, in terms of fulfilling the Marmot principles, that's going to give the Council some serious questions in terms of how we redirect resources if we are not in a financial climate that changes significantly in the next few years? Thank you.
I've got Lindsay McRoberts is looking to come in on that. I'll come to Lindsay.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I think you make a very valid point in terms of where we are in funding, and I think from the key aspect for us in this work is that this is not a project. And I think, just following what the Chair said, this is about public sector reform. It's about really reforming how we deliver services and how we begin to shape services round about neighbourhoods and localities. It's not about cutting services, it's about doing things differently, and we've got to keep that at the very forefront of our minds. So I think you mentioned there that there have been a number of really strong initiatives where funding potentially stops, it's from a different funding stream, and we all go back to the way we worked before. That's fundamentally has to shift through this Marmot work. So it is very much about that neighbourhood team, multi-agency approach, bringing funding together from different parts of the organisation. There's also a preventative spend financial group that's been set up that Jackie's chairing as well, and that's for us to look at actually where is the funding currently being directed. Do we need to begin to think about spend to save? How do we begin to reform where we put money across particularly children's services at this stage? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Could I come now to Lindsay Hamilton?
Thanks, Chair. It's just more of a comment than questions, but I just this report just to thank people again about for this report and for the work that's been done around Marmot, because it's the data in the report is absolutely staggering in the difference in the child poverty rates. To think if you're born in one area of Hamilton and a couple of miles up the road, it's absolutely the difference it'll make to your life is staggering. But I was just wanting to say that the infographics are really, really good. Like, I think that it's really good to set it out like that because it will make people think about it's just really good to set it out visually like that. So that's really good. I'm just wondering though, in the last infographic that Clydesdale South, the women's life expectancy rate isn't there. I was just wondering why that was, why we can work that out.
It's a national issue. There's no data collected on women's life expectancy in that area. It's been raised. It happens in some areas just due to the size and samples, and there's a range of things, but it's been raised. It's not the only place in the country where that information isn't collected.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Can I then come to Maureen Devlin?
Thanks, Chair. This is a great report. It definitely is. And I represent Bothwell, and you see here the fact that there's no poverty in it, and that isn't the case. And see at times to try and get resources in, and on the surface of it all, it looks as though the children that aren't reaching, you know, that the poverty is there for them, that they don't mean anything, because I know personally trying to get funding for various things in Bothwell and Uddingston is really, really difficult. And so therefore it's how we can approach this, that every child matters. It doesn't matter where you live and what your life expects. Every child matters. So I just want to flag that up, because I do get quite a lot of, from my own group, the fact that we don't have poverty in Bothwell. That isn't the case. It's difficulty identifying it and getting resources into it. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any, so can I bring us back to the recommendations in the report? Can I ask, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. I'll come now to the next item, which is item 9, which is also a Marmot Place programme paper, and this is an operational update. Lindsay McRoberts is going to speak to this paper. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on progress made on the Marmot Place programme and seek approval for the Early Years Transformation Pilot. The Executive Committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the contents of the report and work undertaken so far be noted, that proposals for the Council to participate in an early years transformation pilot with partners through the Community Planning Partnership be approved, and that next steps outlined in Section 6 in terms of developing the programme be taken forward. The earlier report you heard from Jen there provides the results so far from Phase 1, which is the data and evidence analysis of the collaboration in South Lanarkshire. These findings provide partners with the evidence to understand where and in what neighbourhoods outcomes vary the most for children's health, and where preventative action is most needed to give every child the best start in life. The evidence from the data phase so far has demonstrated that across South Lanarkshire, Burnbank and surrounding communities report the highest level of children living in low-income households who are experiencing deprivation-driven low outcomes. It is therefore proposed that the focus of the Early Years Transformation Pilot should be on Burnbank and neighbouring communities to include Hillhouse, Whitehill and Udston, with further analysis to be carried out to identify other local communities which also utilise family support services in that area. As elected members, you'll be aware that the Council already has, and it's been mentioned today, family support hubs based in Burnbank, one of a network of 4 such hubs which provide early intervention responses for pregnant women, babies and young people. The Early Years Transformation Pilot will have the advantage of this previous experience and excellent community relationships that already exist across the Burnbank area. Research evidence in the area of prevention and early intervention consistently highlights the wide-ranging benefits of investment in early years. Over the past 30 years, there have been various programmes aiming to support investment in early years across the United Kingdom. Evidence from the Sure Start initiative, almost 20-30 years ago, highlighted that financial investment and co-location of services in communities with high concentrations of child poverty narrowed inequalities. A Sure Start approach is based on focusing investment on neighbourhoods with the highest rates of child poverty and enables universal access to family support services for all families within a geographical area. The integrated model aims to give children a strong start in life and reduced fragmented service experience. In South Lanarkshire, the Marmot Place programme provides a good opportunity for us to establish a Sure Start approach to support our early years work. A multi-agency steering group has been established that will consider the development of our early years family support approach as we proceed with the Early Years Transformation Pilot in Burnbank and surrounding neighbourhoods. The steering group will consider current models, previous programmes and projects of early intervention and family support that currently operate through the successful South Lanarkshire Family Support Hub model and across our early years provision. This will provide a framework for the development of a place-based approach for early family support. Successful development and implementation of the approach within Burnbank and surrounding communities will inform the next phase of implementation in other communities across South Lanarkshire. Any developments will be taken forward in full discussion and consultation with affected local communities, including co-design of services. In addition to the work to develop the programme in other communities, the pilot will inform how services will be developed longer term to provide whole family support beyond early years provision. As part of this 2-year programme to support a whole system approach to planning and working around place and to drive public sector reform across South Lanarkshire, a business case will be developed to consider the creation of a transformation lead post surrounded by a small team. Any proposal, including financial implications, will be presented to a future meeting of the Executive Committee. Funding has been approved by the governing bodies of partners who are involved in the programme. The Council's Executive Committee approved that £1 million underspend from the revenue budget would be transferred to reserves to provide financial support and contribute towards the questions posed by the Marmot Initiative. The NHS Lanarkshire Board agreed to contribute £2 million over a 3-year period to take forward population health actions specifically focused on early years and child poverty. And in December 25, the Integrated Joint Board agreed £2 million over 3 years to support collaborative action with community planning partners to focus again on child poverty and improve early years outcomes. Any further implications resulting from the Marmot Place programme will be included in future updates to committee, as will an action plan that details the plans across South Lanarkshire within the next 3 years. So we'll just take you back to the recommendations of the report, please, that the contents of the report and work so far be noted, that proposals for the Council to participate in an early years transformation pilot through the Community Planning Partnership be approved, and that next steps outlined in Section 6 in terms of developing the programme be taken forward. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lindsay. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you indicate now? And could I come to Maureen Chalmers?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Lindsay and Jane. And thanks to Paul, who I know has driven this work forward as well. The data work is substantial and I welcome it. I think some of us have been around for quite a while. Remember Social Strategy for the 80s when Burn Bank was at the centre of all that tackling poverty work, and has been ever since, along with some other areas. So thank you. And I recognise this is public service reform approach to work. I just want to ask, and you'll probably expect me to ask this, where is community learning development in this work? And I think you will know lessons learned over the years that we can do all we can with children and young people in their own settings, but we have to do a wider piece of work that's about their wider families and their wider community. And therefore community development is a big piece of being successful in this. So I wondered how that was being considered, and conscious that we might need some capacity around about that to do it well. Thanks.
Lindsay.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. The YFCL, or the Youth Community, are already at the table in terms of the steering group. We're currently working with the whole service across YFCL to look at locality-based planning and locality-based support, so moving the current models they have in terms of support to that type of work, and mapping already where they are involved, particularly across family support. So there's a part of this that's about mapping and looking at what's currently available and what's currently happening, where the duplication may be between services, doing refocusing some of that work, but they'll be very much at the part of this. A lot of this will be about parenting, community engagement, employability, all of that it will be part of the work that's happening.
Just to kind of follow up, I'm thinking as well of the wider community. I'm conscious, for example, Burn Bank and Hillhouse, they'll have their local plans and their local organisations, and maybe more related to what the Jen's team do, because I think they need to be part of that, can you support that wider initiative too? Thank you.
And I think one of the key things for this is that this needs to sit within community planning. So it's not about doing a project or initiative to the side of it. It needs to be driven under community planning, eventually taken into children's services, again, which children's services planning sits under community planning. So that's a key driver for us to make sure those plans all link up and make sense for people.
I'll bring in Jen Kerr just to add to that. Jen?
There we go, sorry. So yes, absolutely. We've been doing neighbourhood planning work in Hillhouse, Sudston and Burn Bank for almost 6 years now. It's one of the first ones that we will review. So in community planning, there's also a range of work that we will implement and monitor and keep track of all of the Marmot work across all of our partners. And our worker in that area will be part of that process. And we have 5 years of community development work to bring and share with it, including some grant-based work that we do with Community Links and other providers in the area.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't see any other questions, so can I draw us back to the recommendations and ask that are we agreed?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. I will come now to item 10, which is a review of the council plan, and Tom Little will speak to this item. Tom.
Thanks very much, Chair. So as members here know, the current council plan runs from 2022 to 2027. What this report is doing is providing details of how we propose to renew that council plan, with the intention being to have a draft plan ready to bring to the new council for approval in June 2027, which is the same kind of timetable we followed for the existing council plan back in 22. So as you know, the council plan is our single most important, I would say, strategic document from which all our resource plans and much else that we do flows. It's summarised in section 4 of this report and sets out, just as a reminder, our vision, our values and the outcomes we seek from the work we do. Probably more interestingly for you, at 4.5 and onwards, the report picks up on areas that we expect to focus on as part of the review, going towards 27 to 32. And as well as the bullet points, you'll see at 4.5, and indeed anything else that we pick up as we go through our public consultation and engagement process on this, we're anticipating that the new council plan will be significantly influenced by the matter we've just discussed, the Marmot project, Collaboration for Health Equity in Scotland, as we're calling it here. Section 5 sets out review processes and stages, including those consultation and engagement activities I referred to a second ago. And you'll see that summed up for you in the table at Section 6, which shows the timescales that we envisage going forward. You'll note elected members' engagement features in there twice. We're proposing to engage in October of this year as we prepare the draft that will go forward, and then again in March, April, as we seek to finalise that, having also spoken to our communities about it. Finally, as I said, the plan is to bring this to the second meeting of the new council, which will be in June 27. And what we did last time was, in 22, we also brought a suite of other strategic documents for approval at that time as well. So we're proposing a similar approach this year, that the next council will be presented not just with a new council plan to approve, but also a list of big strategic documents, and they're listed for you at this stage at 8.2 and what that might look at. So the recommendations for this report are to note the contents of the report, to note the timetable we're planning to pursue, and also that list of likely reports to come before the new council in June 27. As ever, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Are there any questions for Tom? Could I come to Alec Allison?
Perhaps not a question, Chair, but a comment. One of the Scottish Government currently has identified increasing the rural population as being a challenge at the moment. Now, whereas I can see that is could be part of an economic strategy and a housing strategy, I actually think it needs to be highlighted in its own right, and think that should be added to one of the points at, 8.2, is to be the objectives of the council plan, so that we are actually focusing on that.
Tom?
I'd be happy to take that back and talk to CMT about it and see what we can bring forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands, so this one is simply for noting. So I will move on to item 11, which is the Scottish Government's National Review of Group-Based Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation and the local engagement arrangements related to that. So Suman Sengupta is going to speak to this report. Suman.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So the purpose of the report, as you see before you, is to advise on the commencement of the Scottish Government National Review of Group-Based Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation, including child criminal exploitation and its statutory basis, scope and timescales. The report also describes the governance, coordination and insurance arrangements for South Lanarkshire Council's engagement with this national review. As you'll see under Section 3 then, the review formally commenced on the 9th of February and is being led by the Care Inspectorate, His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary in Scotland, working alongside Healthcare Improvement Scotland, and His Majesty's Inspector of Education in Scotland. 3.4 sets out the purpose of the review, and as we then move on to Section 4, that sets out both the scope, purpose and structure of the review, which will be organised in 3 stages. 4.5 sets out the Council's role within this as part of the South Lanarkshire Chief Officer's Public Protection arrangements. Section 4.0 onwards then sets out the assurance, learning and governance arrangements that we will deploy within South Lanarkshire as feeding into the National Review, and which members will recall links into the public protection strategy which we presented to the last meeting of the executive group. Within that latter section, I would specifically draw your attention to 4.13 in terms of our recognition of the learning from reviews undertaken elsewhere in the UK, which have highlighted the importance of safeguarding approaches that extend beyond the family setting and address risks arising in peer groups, communities, public spaces and online environments. And the fact that engagement with this national review provides an opportunity to reinforce good practice, strengthen collective understanding and support continuous improvement locally. 4.14 also highlights our recognition that safeguarding children from sexual abuse and exploitation is a complex and sensitive area, and work that involves care, sensitivity and professionalism at all levels. And any opportunity for us to gain learning through this national review will be beneficial and applied at a local level. 4.15 also highlights the important role of elected members in providing governance, oversight and scrutiny of safeguarding arrangements, and confirms that officers will continue to provide appropriate assurance through established reporting and accountability mechanisms. Before I go back to the recommendations on Section 2, I would take you, though, back to a statement I have currently within the report at 3.4, where it highlights that the findings from this national review will inform Scottish Ministers' consideration of whether further national action is required, including, at the time of writing of this report, a potential future public inquiry. As some members will be aware, subsequent to the preparation of this report and the circulation of the agenda pack, on the 25th of February of this year, the Cabinet Secretary for Education announced the establishment of a formal public inquiry into group-based sexual abuse. That inquiry will be chaired by Professor Alexis Jay. Its scope in terms of reference will still be determined. At the time of writing, officers understand that the National Review into group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation will continue as planned as described within this report, and that the findings and learning from this National Review will therefore feed into the public inquiry. As such, the local engagement of both this Council and indeed the public protection arrangements at a local level within South Lanarkshire will continue as set out within the report, and we will advise members over the course of the coming months and years ahead. I would take you back to the recommendations under Section 2 and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Suman. Can I ask if there are any questions in this report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can I just thank Suman for providing that report and that update on, as you've heard, an area of policy and an area of practice that is still evolving. And there are no recommendations other than to note the report, so can I move on to the next item of business, which is urgent business. There are no items of urgent business, so I'll come to item 13, which is the exclusion of the press and public. As the remaining items of business may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information in terms of paragraph 6 and 9 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, members are asked to agree that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for those items of business. So we're now just going to check that we have no press or public present and confirm that the recording and live streaming have been stopped. I also have to advise members participating via Confero that they should be in a secure private location with no other people present.